British Volt, who were going to set up a gigafactory in the UK, has gone out of business. Why is this a big blow for the British automotive industry, and what could it mean for you and me?
Brown car guy.
So if you saw the news yesterday, the UK startup, but initially at least backed by money from Dubai, British Volt, that is, went into administration yesterday. Now, when this thing was first announced a few years ago, it was described as a levelling up opportunity by the government. A £3.8 billion investment to create a facility the size of 50 football pitches, which would have made it the fourth largest building in the UK, potentially employing up to 3,000 people in Blyth and Northumberland, and all just to make batteries for electric vehicles. And remember that by 2030, only EVs can be sold new in the UK. However, it's now going into administration due to insufficient equity investment, is what they reported. And the 232 people that are working there have all been made redundant, sadly. Now, it's possible that the project might still be picked up by someone else, and fingers crossed that it could still happen. Why should we keep our fingers crossed? Well, I'll come back to that. But first, what exactly is a gigafactory? Well, the term comes from Elon Musk, who set up the first ginormous gigafactory in the Nevada desert. Basically, the very expensive raw materials that are required to make battery cells, chiefly stuff like, intensively mined lithium, goes in one end, and even more expensive battery cells come out at the other end. As well as being expensive, these battery cells are heavy, as we already know. This is why, for example, a typical family car in the electric form can be almost twice as heavy as its petrol counterpart. So gigafactories are ideally meant to be set close to car factories, so you reduce the energy required to transport them to assembly plants. Remember, this is electric cars we're talking about, and we already know that the carbon footprint of producing a typical EV is about 26 tons compared to 7 tons for a regular internal combustion engine car. That kind of defeats the whole point of these things, which is that they're meant to be kinder to the environment. So you can imagine that car manufacturers and governments desperately need to get that tonnage down, dramatically down in fact. So that's one aspect of it. Another thing is self-reliance. As we now know, falling out with a country like Russia, for example, as we have done, impacts our energy suppliers, but also raw materials like steel and aluminium, which we need to make cars, and it obviously had an impact there. Now, currently, China has the most number of gigafactories, over 100 in fact. America has several, and over 30 are planned for Europe. As you can see, there is something of a global race on to build these huge battery plants. In the UK, we have what? And that's Chinese owned. And it basically sits near and serves the Nissan plant in Sunderland. It has 1.7 gigawatt hour capacity. Now make a note of that number, 1.7 gigawatt hour. There's a £1 billion investment that is going to take that number up to 9 gigawatt hour by the middle of this decade. And by 2030 itself, a further investment should take that up to 25 gigawatt hour. Now that's a big number, right? Well, according to the SMMT, the Society for Motor Manufacturers and Traders, they reckon that by 2030, we actually need to have at least 60 gigawatt hours. 60 gigawatt hours! Great Scott! Now that would enable the production of 1 million cars in the UK. So we actually need about 4 or 5 gigafactories to sustain the UK car industry, and the only one that was supposedly happening has now stalled. But then how crucial is the UK car industry? Why could this scenario mean that actually we'll be running petrol and diesel cars for many, many years after the 2030 ban instead of driving brand new EVs? Well, let's start by looking at the UK motor industry, and let's take, for example, the facts and figures from the SMMT. The UK industry, car industry that is, contributes £67 billion in terms of turnover and £14 billion in terms of added value to the UK economy. It also invests around £3 billion on research and development for new technology, like several developments that are happening right now for better battery technology, but the benefits of which will probably be felt elsewhere, most likely in China, because we just don't have the facilities to do anything about it. Now, the car industry itself employs 182,000 people in manufacturing and around 780,000 across the wider industry. All those jobs will be at risk if we don't get our gigafactories. Now, vehicles account for 10% of total exports from the UK. We send vehicles to over 150 countries. In fact, 80% of our cars are exported, generating £77 billion of trade. We have over 30 car manufacturers making over 70 models. That's nearly 900,000 cars a year and 70,000 commercial vehicles with 1.6 million engines made in the UK. Not having gigafactories will be a huge setback to those levels of car production. Now, of course, we could just continue to import battery cells, and top-end luxury brands such as Bentley, Rolls-Royce, Aston Martin, etc. They can easily just tap into the German supply, and the added costs would really make little difference to the already high sale prices of those cars and the huge profitability margins that they have anyway. Take another manufacturer such as, say, Stellantis, that huge manufacturing group. Now, they have already announced that for its electric van hub at its Ellesmere port plant, the batteries are actually going to come from the Gigafactory in northern France. But here's another kicker, and it's thanks to our old friend Brexit. See, batteries are expensive and they're heavy to transport, but post-Brexit rules require that by 2027, up to 70% of a vehicle's battery cost must originate in Britain or the EU, or exports will face tariffs. So in other words, with 80% of our cars normally being exported, even if we keep building them here, but import the battery cells, we won't be able to export them because they'll just be too expensive. What does all this mean then? Basically, the UK car industry could diminish even further without those crucial exports, making cars here just won't be viable anymore. Jaguar Land Rover might move lock, stock and barrel to its parent home in India, and we'll be driving around in Nissan EVs. Now, nothing wrong with that. They're great cars, and you can check out some reviews that I've done quite recently on this channel, but it means that our choice will be somewhat limited. All is not lost. We may still continue to have JLR here, for example, thanks to a joint venture that is exploring the potential for a new gigafactory in Coventry, pretty much the home of JLR, in fact the traditional heart of car manufacturing in the UK. The council there is backing the project, but large-scale funding is yet to be secured. There is, of course, another alternative. Let's just drop the 2030 deadline for banning the sale of new internal combustion engine cars.
Brown car guy.
Hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please hit the like button and share this video as well if you can. And while you're at it, check out these guys who also sponsor my content. I am deeply grateful to them because it helps me to buy new equipment, put fuel in the cars, and yes, buy a cup of coffee. You can do the same. Just go here or right here on YouTube. Just hit these three little dots down here and click on thanks. Make sure you're signed in first. My content is free, but this is how you can help me keep it that way. I may even send you a gift. Oh, by the way, watch this next.